Pastor Jay mentioned, my name is Scott Stevenson, for those of you I have not met yet. And as you may remember, this past January, Pastor Jay's sermon series was titled Urgency. In this series, Pastor Jay reminded us that our number one mission is to lead others to Christ. He also let us know that we need to have a sense of urgency in doing so. I remember listening each Sunday and thinking to myself that it's time I actually did something to try to make a difference. Some of the reasons I didn't was due to a lack of confidence, my shyness, and my social anxiety. Also, in my mind, I felt I didn't know enough or haven't been a Christian long enough to be able to lead someone else to Christ. At least those were some of the excuses I used. By the way, I have a lot more excuses if anybody needs some. Although not as exciting as maybe doing a mission trip to Africa, I felt being called to try to reach people and maybe make a small difference by starting a Bible study where I work. This may not seem like a big deal, but for me it actually was. Leading a Bible study was a pretty big leap of faith for me. I've only attended a couple Bible studies myself, and those were with Pastor Jay and maybe one or two other people that I considered safe. Our company has never done anything remotely like this before, and I had no idea what to expect. There were people at work that probably knew I was a Christian, but only because I might have mentioned our church or going to church in passing. I admittedly didn't do a great job of shining God's light in the workplace. One of the reasons I thought a Bible study might be a good idea was because I was constantly hearing of all sorts of issues our employees were having. Things like alcohol, drugs, family, financial, and health issue. I found a video Bible study by Pastor Max Lucado on Right Now Media called Max on Life that I thought might be a good Bible study to start with because, as the title states, it has to do with life issues. It uses actual testimonies from people on real life issues and Pastor Max's biblical teaching as it relates to those issues. The other reason I chose this is because it was a video series and I didn't have to talk a whole lot. I made sure everyone in our company was invited, but I really didn't have a clue if anybody would show up. The study was to take place over our lunch break on Fridays, so I knew the second shift people wouldn't be able to attend, and that left me with 6 office staff and approximately 20 shop employees that were working during that time frame. To my surprise, we had 8 people show up the first day and 7 to 9 every week. The good news is I didn't scare anybody away. Well, except for maybe one. She told me she was a Catholic, and I told her we wouldn't hold that against her, and she was invited back. Sometimes my attempt at humor backfires. The first day we got together, I thought I would share a little bit of how I came to Christ and why I decided to do this Bible study. I really didn't have anything planned to say, but as it turns out, I ended up giving my whole testimony. I had no intention of doing that, but the Holy Spirit just kind of took over and I went with it. At one point, I noticed a few people were actually tearing up. I think it was the part where I mentioned there was a point in my life where I didn't care if I lived or died. I'd originally planned on keeping this Bible study kind of chill, but so much for that idea. God had a different plan, I guess. It was probably a good thing that people found out I was flawed just like everybody else, and not this perfect person that I appear to be. That's an attempt at humor also. We had a good mix of people attending, and most of the people that showed up didn't really surprise me. However, there were a couple. One was a guy that worked for us for a long time, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I really didn't care for him. But the Christian part of me kicked in, and I let him stay. I started each Bible study with a music video of one of my favorite Christian songs, and we would listen while we ate lunch. I tried to tie the song into the topic of the study for that day. I think everybody enjoyed it, and it got them to relax. The studies were going well, and people were watching the videos intently. I think it was the 3rd or 4th week when one of the guys stuck around after everyone had left. He was upset and shared an issue he was having. I just happened to have some experience with that same issue, and I was able to help him. We talked about it, and when he was getting ready to go back to work, I told him I would pray for him. I was thinking he was going to leave the conference room, but I noticed he bowed his head and was waiting for my prayer. I was like, oh, I guess he wants prayer now. Most of the time when I tell somebody I'll pray for them, I mean later, when I'm alone. However, this time I was obligated to come up with something quick since he's standing there with his head bowed. I said a quick prayer for myself, asking God for help to come up with something. As always, he came through and I started praying. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember thinking to myself, wow, that didn't sound too bad. It must have been okay because he thanked me and went back to work. It was also during this 10 weeks we were doing the Bible study that another employee's health took a turn for the worst after several years of battling severe liver issues brought on by his heavy drinking. Sean was not only a coworker but a friend to all and a very loyal employee. He was placed in hospice care during the time frame of our Bible study. If it wasn't for the Bible study, we as a group of Christians would not have had the opportunity to come together and pray for him and his family. Sean passed away 1 week after entering hospice care and a day before our next Bible study. The topic for this upcoming study just happened to deal with death and life after death. I obviously had no way of planning the topic for this particular time. It was another one of those God things. If you ever want to see a group of people cry, just play the music video, Scars in Heaven, the day after a friend dies. It was a very emotional Bible study that day, but it gave us an opportunity to grieve together as a group, and it was very special. Our last Bible study was a little over a month ago. Once again, after everyone had left the room, one of the guys stayed after to thank me for doing the Bible study. He went on to say that he turned his back on God a few years ago after the death of his 35-year-old sister who had lost her battle with cancer. He was really close to her and didn't understand why God would let this happen to such a young mother of two. He said the Bible study really gave him a lot to think about. It turns out that the person I am referring to is the one that I was surprised to see and the one I said I didn't really care for. I felt so convicted in my heart. I knew his sister had died, but I really didn't stop to think about the impact it had on him or his life, and I never offered any support. That's something I really regret now. It was then that I realized I needed to start looking at people with more compassion, try to see people through the eyes of Jesus. I never before looked at my place of work as a mission field until this happened. I never thought I would be someone to hold a Bible study at work. But I can tell you, whenever I step out of my comfort zone in God's name, He always, without fail, has my back. I don't have any mission trips to Africa currently planned, and I don't know what God has planned for me next. But after this experience, I know whenever He calls, I'm going to ignore all the self-doubt and excuses and just do it.
Man, thank you.